India has long been at the crossroads of a multitude of very diverse and distinguished civilizations throughout history, and as a result of its geography and climate, has typically had a much higher population density than the rest of the planet, with the region of South Asia fluctuating between 20 and 35% of the entire population of the human race since antiquity, showing a penchant for rapid growth and migration to this region. This has resulted in an interesting patchwork of languages, genetics, cultural practices, religions, and traditions throughout the area, painting a fascinating interconnected mosaic of demographic continuity among these peoples. Although people in the West often stereotype those from the region as all being the same, this couldn't be further from the truth, as not only are there major differences between the different ethno-linguistic groups in the region, but also within groups as well because of the historic caste system widespread throughout almost all communities. Genetic studies have found the indigenous people of the subcontinent from some tens of thousands of years ago to be some of the first people to have settled in Eurasia after migrating out of Africa, having some affinity for the Andamanese and other Southeast Asian natives such as the Negritos, and more distantly the Melanesians of the Pacific Islands. It's long been speculated and all but confirmed through genetic and linguistic analysis that the Dravidians originated from a wave of migrants from the Middle East many thousands of years ago. Although ironically, most of the Indo-Aryan speakers from northern India actually have a higher degree of ancestry from this migration wave than those who currently speak the Dravidian languages in the south. Additionally, as I've discussed in a previous video, there was also a large degree of demographic diffusion from the east into the subcontinent as well, with there being varying levels of Eastern Eurasian admixture prevalent in the northeast section of the region, along with pockets of Austroasiatic, Sino-Tibetan, and Thai-speaking peoples there as well, clearly distinct from other South Asians. Lastly, there has also been a long history of migration to South Asia from the region of Central Asia, and the two are very much interconnected, so much so that they are sometimes grouped together from a geographic standpoint as the region of South Central Asia. This might seem strange considering that the current countries of Central Asia, like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, may appear to have little to nothing in common with the country of India today, being a Eurasian, Turkic speaking Muslim people group. But before their arrival into the steppes of Eurasia, and even afterwards, Central Asia has had a large impact on South Asia. Just look at the migration of the ancient Indo-Iranians from the plains of Eurasia down south into the Iranian plateau in the northern half of India, radically altering the language, culture, and customs of these civilizations, pushing back many of the pre-existing cultures and giving rise to new nations and empires. The Mughals are an example of a conquest or migration from Central Asia into South Asia after the Indo-Aryan expansion, and most people are at least partially aware of the Mughals and their rivalry with other neighboring Islamic empires at the time, such as the Persians and Ottomans, but their history is actually far stranger than one would actually imagine. Today, we're going to be discussing the origin and history of the Mughals and their impact on South Asia, and just why on earth we don't see them around anymore. A major misconception in the Western world is that the Mughals were responsible for spreading Islam to India, when in fact Islamic forces had been invading and making inroads into South Asia since the 8th century AD, starting with the Umayyad conquest of Sindh in modern-day Pakistan. However, the religion didn't only spread to the subcontinent through violent encroaching means, as the bulk of the old Islamic communities of Bengal and southern India largely rode through trade relations with the Middle East, particularly Arabs and to a lesser degree Persians, and in fact many Muslims of southern India and Sri Lanka claim to have partial Arab ancestry, especially the Sri Lankan and Indian Moors, known as the Sanakar and Mappila respectively, although to what extent this is actually historically accurate or largely embellishment is unknown. The origins of the Mughals actually starts nearly 1,000 years ago in the plains and deserts just north of China. That's right, we're talking about the Mongols and the closely related Turks. When the Mongols began their unprecedented, ambitious, and ruthless subjugation of Eurasia, there were few areas that they truly failed in completely sweeping through. The Mongols were famously repelled from both Japan and Vietnam in a rather miraculous turn of events for the defenders, but the Mongols also attempted an invasion of the Indian subcontinent, with only minor initial successes against the Delhi Sultanate, an Islamic empire primarily in northern India, founded by Iranian and Turkic invaders. After this, the Mongols never again had any serious incursions into the subcontinent, and the area continued to be under Islamic rule with an elite of primarily Persian or Pashtun origin. In addition to the already established Turkic states that were popping up in Central Asia, the Mongol invasion radically changed the political situation of much of Eurasia, as in lieu of the Arab and Persian dynasties that previously dominated the Middle East post-Islamization, Turco-centric empires would arise in their place, such as the Ilkhanate of Iran or Seljuks of Anatolia. It's estimated that 30 to 40 million people, or around 10% of the Earth's population at the time, perished to warfare during the conquest of Genghis Khan and his direct descendants, with one of the more brutal but strategically unmatched relatives of Genghis being Timur, or Tamerlane, an utterly ruthless leader of Central Asia. Timur, like much of the population of the region, was of mixed Turkic, Mongol, and Iranian heritage and united many of these people under one banner as he proceeded to ride throughout Central Asia, Iran, the Caucasus, parts of Anatolia and Mesopotamia, as well as the fringes of the subcontinent in a truly massive empire. One of Timur's 3 times great-grandson, Babur or Zahir-ud-Din Muhammad of Central Asia, would eventually be responsible for a massive invasion of South Asia in the 16th century, with this dynasty being known as the Mughals, thought to be a corruption of the word Mongol, since Babur himself was quite boisterous of his descent from Genghis Khan and Tamerlane. The Mughals weren't exactly a unified ethnicity, though, as they were an amalgamation of many different peoples throughout the Islamic world, such as Chagatai Turks, Persians, Pashtuns, and to a much lesser extent Arabs, and really prioritized both their Islamic as well as their Turco-Mongol heritage, although the latter would fade over time. The original Mughal invading force would have been most closely analogous to the modern Uzbeks or Turkmen from modern-day Central Asia, or perhaps even the Hazara of Afghanistan, since the latter group is largely acknowledged to be of Turco-Mongol and Iranian descent, but are substantially Islamized and speak a dialect of the Persian language. Now, unlike the Indo-Aryan invasion from millennia prior, there wasn't exactly a huge settlement to follow from Central Asia after the initial conquest by the Turkic, Mongolic, Iranic forces that comprised the Mughals, and hence the elite largely mingled and integrated with the previous Islamic population that was already established in the subcontinent, with there also being a large number of Islamic converts from the poorer and more marginalized lower caste Hindus. The Mughals would temporarily contract back into Afghan territory after the death of Babur, but would once again greatly expand into South Asian lands, encompassing the bulk of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and most of India, with the exception of the southernmost region. Similarly, some of the Islamic sultanates of the Deccan Plateau in south-central India were also founded by Turkic or Persian warriors from Central Asia, with their main rivals in the region being all but trampled underfoot in the initial conquest of this massive territory. Starting in the 1600s for over a century, the Mughals were the uncontested power in the region of South Asia, with 80% of the region falling under their control. Many impressive structures and monuments were erected during this period across the country, one of which you may easily recognize as the Taj Mahal, and the relative wealth and prosperity of the Mughals made them a prime rival to the other Islamic empires to their west, namely the Ottomans and Safavids, known as the Gunpowder Empires. Under the Mughals, the region of South Asia saw unprecedented levels of population growth, technological development, and new relations forming with surrounding cultures and civilizations, and although the quality of life was raised for most citizens, much of the Hindu and Sikh populations were unhappy with Islamic rule. Under Muslim rule in India, but especially during the time of the Mughals, a large number of South Asian Muslims would choose the surname Khan. Rather intriguing considering none of them actually had any descent from Genghis Khan, and the last time he invaded the region, countless civilians were slaughtered. But to a certain extent, the Mughals did consider themselves to be the heirs of the Mongol Empire due to their historic Turkic heritage by way of the Chagatai and Timurid empires. Khan, as well as surnames such as Shah and Begum, are closely linked with the Mughal period and are extremely common among the Muslims of northern South Asia, such as Punjabis, Pathans, Urdu speakers, as well as Bangladeshis. Persian, Turkic, and Arabic were the primary languages used by the royalty of the Mughals, although over time, through intermarriage and further integration with the already established Indian population, they eventually switched over to a dialect of Hindustani that was greatly influenced by all 3 of these languages we now know today as Urdu. The Urdu dialect existed in South Asia before the Mughal conquest, but the vocabulary and syntax, as well as the culture surrounding it, were very heavily influenced by these former languages during Mughal rule. Although Urdu and Hindi do have a great deal of similarities and a certain degree of mutual intelligibility, one stark contrast is that Urdu is written in the Perso-Arabic script, while Hindi is mostly transcribed in the Devanagari script of South Asian origins, showing the difference in the culture of the people who speak these languages. The Mughal Empire didn't last forever, though, as in the 18th century, its territorial integrity and power was being slowly chipped away by various European powers such as Britain, France, Portugal, and others, who were also quite busy fighting amongst themselves, by the way, but also through the rise of the Sikh Punjabi Empire to their north and the Hindu Marathas from their south. As more and more cracks formed in the Mughal governance, their Punjabi and Marathi rivals gained more power until the Mughals were defeated altogether and were completely replaced by the former two powers as well as the British Company rule in India. As a legacy of the Mughals and other Islamic powers of South Asia, by the time India and Pakistan gained independence from Great Britain in 1946, nearly a fourth of the South Asian population adhered to Islam, and tens of millions spoke Urdu as a mother tongue. While today, this has grown to nearly a third of the combined populations of Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan practicing Islam, and 80 to 90 million Urdu speakers, although it also acts as the official language of Pakistan and a lingua franca between much of the Islamic South Asian community. However, when looking at the ethnic landscape of South Asia today, we can clearly see the descendants of the Marathas and Sikhs, but no one identifies as an ethnic Mughal nowadays, likely due to their assimilation and integration with the native South Asians, although I suppose Urdu speakers from the north are the closest we'd see to the heirs of the Mughals, similar to how Greeks consider themselves to be the heirs of the Byzantines. However, it's impossible to deny that the Mughals have had an inordinate impact on the identity and culture of the modern Islamic population of South Asia, and even the region as a whole. So please let me know your thoughts on the Mughals and their influence on the geopolitical situation and culture of South Asia and beyond. As always, this has been Mason. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.